The silent standoff, the ships floated like silent giants at the edge of enemy space. No shots were fired, no words were spoken. The deep black of space stretched between them like a cold ocean. On one side, the Vorgons, proud and ruthless, filled the sky with their massive fleets. On the other side, the humans waited quietly, their ship smaller but positioned like a hunter's trap. Inside the main human command ship, Commander Rylan stood before a large glass window. His sharp eyes scanned the enemy fleet, but his face showed no fear. Around him, the command deck buzzed with soft whispers and blinking lights, but no one dared to break the heavy silence. The Vorgons believed they had already won. They had mocked the human ambassadors, broken their promises, and humiliated Earth at every chance. They saw humanity as weak, slow, and soft. To them, the humans were just another stepping stone on their path to galactic rule. Commander Rylan knew better. He had seen the reports, the secret missions, and the quiet preparations happening back on Earth. He knew that today was not about fear. Today was about patience. The longer they waited, the closer they came to unleashing a power no alien had yet seen. A soft voice came over the comms. "Commander, the Vorgons are sending another message." "Put it on," Rylan said, his voice calm. The message crackled through the speakers. It was filled with the usual arrogance. "Humans, stand down. Surrender your forces and your planet will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed." A low murmur ran through the crew, but Rylan raised a hand. The bridge fell silent again. He leaned forward, pressed a single button, and sent the same response they had sent before. Just one sentence. "You have not yet seen our true strength." The message echoed back across the stars, simple but heavy with meaning. The Vorgon commander sitting inside his flagship laughed when he heard it. He turned to his officers and shook his head. "Pathetic," he said. "They are trying to scare us, with empty words." But deep inside, a small cold feeling began to grow in him. Something was wrong. The humans were too calm, too quiet. Out in space, small human ships started to move. Not toward the Vorgon fleet, but into strange positions, forming long, thin lines and arcs that made no sense to the Vorgon sensors. It almost looked like the humans were drawing shapes across the stars. "What are they doing?" a Vorgon officer asked. "Ignore them," their commander said. "Prepare to fire." Back on the human command ship, Rylan watched as the final pieces fell into place. He thought about Earth, about the families sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger hanging over them. He thought about the long years humanity had spent being underestimated, overlooked, and pushed aside. They had learned from every insult, every defeat, every betrayal. And now, they were ready to show the galaxy what it meant to be human. "Status?" Rylan asked. "Fleet is in position," his second-in-command replied. "Waiting for your signal." Rylan looked out into the stars one more time. He could feel it in his bones. The turning of history, the moment when everything would change. He knew the price would be high. He knew many would not survive. But he also knew this was the only way to protect Earth, to protect their future. "Wait," he said quietly. "Let them come closer." The Vorgons, seeing no attack from the humans, grew bolder. Their fleets began to advance. Thousands of ships, burning bright with weapons ready to fire. On the human bridge, the tension was like a thick fog. Every crew member watched their screens, holding their breath. 500,000 kilometers, 400,000, 300,000. "Ready main weapons," Rylan said. The ships began to hum with power. Hidden guns, secret launch bays, and cloaked satellites around the system woke up silently. Years of secret work, hidden even from most humans, were about to reveal themselves. 200,000 kilometers. The Vorgons armed their cannons, confident they would crush the humans. In a single strike. 100,000 kilometers. Rylan raised his hand. "Now," he whispered. And space itself seemed to explode. Hidden mines activated. Cloaked ships decloaked and fired. Satellites unleashed invisible waves that disabled enemy shields. In seconds, the front lines of the Vorgon fleet were ripped apart. Their proud ships, built over centuries of war, crumbled like sandcastles under a rising tide. The humans did not cheer. They moved with cold, perfect coordination. Every attack had a purpose, every move had been planned for years. As the Vorgan commander screamed for backup, Rylan sent one last message to the galaxy. This is your warning. Earth will not fall. Humanity will not be broken. Prepare to witness what you have long feared. The war had truly begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The forgotten weapon, far away from the main battlefield, hidden deep within the surface of Earth's moon, another story was unfolding. Long ago, while the rest of the galaxy watched humanity struggle to catch up, Earth's leaders had made a secret decision. They had poured their best minds and strongest resources into building something that the galaxy would never expect. A hidden weapon, a secret so powerful that even most humans had no idea it existed. They called it Project Eclipse. In a chamber, buried beneath miles of rock and metal, hundreds of engineers and soldiers worked quietly. No windows showed the outside world. No signals leaked from their base. For years they had lived in silence, waiting for the day their work would be needed. Today the red alarms flashed across their screens. Today, Project Eclipse would be awakened. General Kira Hale, commander of the lunar base, stood in front of the activation panel. Her face was calm, but her heart pounded like a drum. She had trained for this moment for 2 decades, but even she knew that what they were about to unleash would change everything. All units, prepare to activate, she said into her headset. Across the giant hangar, massive doors began to slide open. Hidden behind them were ships unlike any others. Not the usual metal giants seen in human fleets, but sleek, black crafts built using ancient alien technology found deep beneath Earth's oceans many years ago. Humanity had kept the discovery secret. While they played the part of the underdog on the galactic stage, they had quietly learned from a civilization older and more advanced than anything alive today. These ships, powered by forgotten science, carried weapons that could bend light, tear through shields, and destroy entire fleets without leaving a trace. They had been named the Phantoms. All Phantom units launch, General Hale commanded. One by one, the black ships rose from the hangar floor, their engines whisper quiet. They moved like shadows across the surface of the moon, then shot into space, invisible to all but the most advanced sensors. Meanwhile, back at the front line, Commander Rylan watched as the Vorgan fleet began to regroup after the first devastating human attack. The Vorgans had lost dozens of ships already, but their numbers were still overwhelming. Their main battleships, massive and heavily armored, were pushing forward, trying to break through the human defenses. Rylan knew the human fleet could not hold them back forever. They needed something more. He tapped his communicator twice, a signal only understood by one other person. On the moon, General Hale smiled grimly. She tapped her console in return. The Phantom fleet activated their main systems. Suddenly, dozens of Vorgan ships, still miles away from Earth, began to experience strange failures. Their engines died. Their shields blinked out. Their communication systems fell silent. Without warning, ships spun out of control and collided with each other like toys in a storm. The Vorgans panicked. They had no idea what was happening. Their sensors saw nothing. Their radars detected nothing. It was as if the very air of space had turned against them. "What is happening?" the Vorgan commander roared, slamming his fist against the arm of his chair. But no one had answers. Their ships were dying without a fight. Their weapons were useless. They were blind, deaf and powerless against an enemy they could not see. High above them, the Phantom ships moved in perfect silence, striking down one target after another. They used no bright lasers, no flashing missiles. Their weapons were, like the touch of a ghost, silent, invisible, unstoppable. On the human command ship, Rylan watched the chaos unfold with a hard expression. He had waited years for this. Humanity had been treated as second-class beings for too long. Now they would show the galaxy that patience, intelligence, and courage were far more powerful than size or arrogance. "Report," he said. "Phantom fleet is successful, Commander," his officer replied. "Enemy losses are increasing. They cannot see us. They cannot fight back. Good, Rylan said. Keep pressure. No mercy until they surrender. The galaxy watched in disbelief as news spread. Human forces, long considered weak and foolish, were destroying one of the most feared empires without losing a single major ship. Alien leaders across hundreds of worlds stared at their screens, feeling a cold shiver run down their spines. They realized something terrifying. Humanity had never been weak. They had been hiding their true strength, preparing in the shadows, waiting for the moment when the galaxy's arrogance would blind them. And now, that moment had come. On the Vorgan flagship, the commander made a desperate decision. He ordered all remaining forces to retreat, but it was too late. The Phantom fleet moved faster than any retreat. Within minutes, half of the remaining Vorgan ships were neutralized. As the survivors fled into deep space, limping and broken, Commander Rylan sent a final message across open channels. We offered peace. You chose war. Now you will face the full strength of humanity. The message echoed through the stars, carried by every relay station, every communication hub. Millions heard it, and millions trembled. Humanity had revealed its forgotten weapon, and the war for the galaxy had truly begun. The first strike, the galaxy had gone silent. Across distant worlds and space stations, leaders of many alien races watched in frozen shock as the reports came flooding in. Humanity, once mocked and pushed aside, had crippled the Vorgan Empire's fleets in less than a single day. No one had expected this. No one had believed the old stories about the human spirit, the warnings whispered long ago that Earth was a sleeping giant. But now, the galaxy was learning that humanity's patience had limits, and once crossed, their answer was swift and merciless. Inside the command ship orbiting near Mars, Commander Rylan studied the next phase of the battle. A large digital map floated before him, showing the Vorgan-controlled sectors, supply routes, communication hubs, and hidden military outposts. Each one had been carefully marked during years of quiet observation. Humans had not rushed into war, blindly. They had planned for this day with steady, quiet hands. "Commander," said Lieutenant Arden, stepping forward, "all Phantom fleets are ready. Stealth ships are in position. We are awaiting your orders." Rylan gave a slow nod. "Then it's time," he said. "Begin the first strike." No loud alarms sounded. No grand speeches were made. Instead, silent signals traveled across human fleets scattered across space. Within moments, hundreds of operations began at once, perfectly timed, perfectly placed. In the outer rim, a small Vorgan fuel depot sat in silence, guarded by only a handful of ships. Suddenly, without warning, the depot's defense systems failed. Hidden human saboteurs who had lived among the Vorgan workers for years triggered their explosives. The depot burst into flames, sending debris spiraling into nearby orbit. In another sector, a Vorgan communication hub that controlled messages across dozens of star systems began to flicker. Without any clear attack, the network collapsed, cutting off Vorgan fleets from their leaders, leaving them blind and confused. On a remote moon, a secret Vorgan shipyard building their newest warships was swallowed by a massive explosion. The workers had no chance to escape. By the time nearby Vorgan patrols arrived, the shipyard was nothing but a field of burning wreckage. Everywhere across Vorgan space, humanity struck with invisible blades. They attacked not only ships, but the very heart of the Vorgan Empire, their fuel, their weapons, their communication, their spirit. In a small hidden base on the human side, Captain Lena Torres watched the destruction unfold through her tactical screens. She had been one of the many silent agents planted years ago, blending in among the stars, gathering information, waiting for this day. A small smile touched her lips as she watched the proud Vorgan forces stumble in panic. "They thought we were fools," she said quietly to herself. "They never understood. We learn, we wait, we endure." Meanwhile, on the main battlefield, the Vorgan commander grew more desperate. Without fuel, his fleets were trapped. Without communication, his officers were lost. He sent orders the old way through couriers and risky transmissions, but it was too slow. By the time his ships moved, the humans had already shifted their position, striking again and again, never giving the Vorgans a chance to regroup. "How are they everywhere?" the Vorgan commander shouted, slamming his fists onto the control panel. "How could we not see this coming?" None of his officers had answers. They had been too arrogant, too proud to think humans could ever threaten them. Now, that arrogance was costing them their empire. On the human flagship, Ryland stood quietly as the battle reports poured in. One by one, key Vorgan worlds were falling. Factories destroyed, fleets crippled, colonies abandoned. Panic was spreading like a fire, yet Ryland felt no joy. He knew this was only the beginning. The Vorgans would not surrender easily. A cornered beast was dangerous, and the Vorgans, though wounded, were still fierce. "Prepare Phase 2. Ryland ordered. "We hit their strongholds next." "Yes, Commander," replied Arden. As the human fleets prepared for the next wave, Ryland thought back to the lessons of Earth's long history. Every time humanity had been pushed to the edge, by war, by disaster, by betrayal, they had not only survived but grown stronger. Now in the cold emptiness of space, they were proving once again that the human spirit could not be broken. The first strike had done more than just damage ships and buildings. It had shattered the myth of Vorgan invincibility. For centuries, the Vorgans had ruled by fear. Now, that fear was turning against them. On distant worlds under Vorgan control, rebellions began to stir. Alien races who had lived in silent suffering watched the fall of Vorgan fleets and found new courage. Secret meetings were held. Weapons hidden away long ago were unearthed. The spark of freedom, lit by humanity's first strike, was beginning to catch fire across the galaxy. And Ryland knew deep in his heart that humanity's war was no longer just for Earth. It was for every world that had ever been crushed under the weight of a tyrant's boot. As the stars above them burned with the fires of battle, humanity's true war had just begun. The secret alliance, as the fires of battle spread across Vorgan space, a new force began to rise, not one made of weapons or ships, but of people, of voices that had been silent for too long. The Vorgans had ruled their empire with fear, crushing any who dared to resist. Now as the mighty Vorgan fleets fell to humanity's hidden strength, the chains that had bound so many worlds began to break. In the shadows of distant planets, in the forgotten halls of ruined cities, whispers grew louder. Old enemies of the Vorgans, long forced into hiding, now saw a chance for freedom. They had suffered for generations, dreaming of rebellion but too afraid to act. Humanity's first strike had lit a fire inside them, a hope they had not felt in centuries. Commander Ryland knew this was the moment they had been waiting for. Not every battle needed to be fought with ships and guns. Some battles were won by hearts and courage. If humanity could unite these broken worlds, the Vorgans would never stand a chance. Inside the command center on Ryland's ship, a secret meeting was taking place. Holograms of leaders from across the stars flickered into view. Rough-faced warriors, quiet scholars, and tired farmers who had once ruled great civilizations before the Vorgans crushed them. "You have seen what we can do," Ryland said, his voice steady. "We do not seek to conquer. We seek to end the rule of fear. Fight with us. Stand with us. Together, we can break the chains forever." There was a long silence. Then an elder from the torn world of Zereth leaned forward. His skin was rough and gray, his eyes filled with pain and old anger. "You ask much, human," he said. "Many of us have lost everything because we trusted the wrong allies before." "I understand," Ryland answered. "We do not ask for your trust. We offer you a choice. You can fight for your freedom now, or live forever under their boots." Another leader spoke, her voice sharp and filled with sorrow. She was Dari, a rebel from the world of Seros, where the Vorgans had burned entire forests to punish a single village. "We have no fleets left," she said. "No armies. How can we fight?" Ryland smiled, but it was not a smile of pride. It was a smile of shared pain. "You have something stronger," he said. "You have your will, your knowledge of your own lands, and you have us. Humanity will stand with you." Slowly, one by one, the leaders agreed. It was not a grand alliance signed with golden pens. There were no banners waving in the wind. It was a promise made between broken peoples and a rising humanity. A quiet vow that they would fight together, live or die for something better than slavery. As the alliances formed, human fleets moved carefully. They sent supplies to rebel worlds, trained fighters in secret bases hidden under mountains and oceans. Human engineers repaired old ships left to rust in forgotten docks. Human doctors healed wounds that had been left untreated for decades. And everywhere they went, humanity shared the same simple message: you are not alone anymore. On the Vorgan homeworld, the Council of War sat in growing fear. Their spies brought terrible news every day: fuel shortages, uprisings, attacks on supply lines, fleets refusing orders, entire sectors falling silent. This cannot be, one general growled. They are just humans. How can they turn our own subjects against us? The High Warlord, an ancient Vorgan who had ruled for nearly 200 years, stared at the reports with empty eyes. He knew the answer. They did not turn them, he said quietly. We turned them long ago with our cruelty, with our greed. But knowing the truth did not save them. On planet after planet, rebel forces struck from the shadows. Small attacks at first, a destroyed fuel convoy, a missing patrol. But soon, entire cities rose in open rebellion. Flags of freedom, some old and tattered, some newly stitched, flew over places the Vorgans had ruled without mercy for generations. Human officers moved among the rebels, teaching them to fight, to resist, to believe again. And the rebels taught the humans in return secret paths through dangerous terrain, hidden weaknesses in Vorgan defenses, ancient knowledge of survival under occupation. It was not a perfect alliance. There were arguments, mistakes, betrayals. But through it all, humanity held firm. They had come not to rule, but to help. And the galaxy began to see them not as conquerors, but as friends, as allies, as hope itself. On the bridge of his flagship, Rylan watched the new reports come in. Planets liberated, fleets destroyed. Hope, spreading faster than any weapon could carry it. We are not fighting this war alone anymore, he said softly. And across the stars, in places where human faces had never been seen before, voices rose together in a new kind of song. A song of resistance, of courage, of freedom. The secret alliance had been born, and the Vorgans, for the first time in their long reign, began to feel something they had never felt before: fear. The Vorgan desperation. The Vorgans had never known true fear. For generations, they had ruled the stars with iron fists, crushing any who stood against them. But now, the mighty Vorgan Empire stood on the edge of collapse, and fear seeped into their bones like a poison they could not escape. Inside the Vorgan High Council chamber, the mood was dark. Once a place of proud debates and loud victories, now it was filled with whispers, trembling hands, and eyes full of doubt. The High Warlord slammed his clawed fist onto the table, making it shake. Enough of this shame, he growled. If the humans want a war, then we will bring the war to their home. The council members shifted nervously. Attacking Earth itself was a dangerous move. Humanity had shown strength and patience that none of them had expected. But desperation clouded their judgment. The Vorgans had already lost fleets, colonies, and allies. Rebellion was spreading like wildfire. They had only one choice left: to strike at the heart of humanity and hope to crush their spirit in one brutal blow. Orders went out in secret. Hidden fleets were gathered, pulling ships from far corners of the Empire. Weapons were loaded. Soldiers were prepared. Every resource the Vorgans had left was thrown into this final assault. They knew that if they failed, the Vorgan Empire would not survive. On Earth, the skies remained peaceful. Children played in green parks. Traders sold fruits in crowded markets. Families laughed under the warm sun, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond their reach. But humanity's leaders were not blind. Deep beneath the oceans, buried inside mountain ranges, and hidden in orbit above the planet, Earth's true defenses waited silently. They had been built not for show but for survival. Layers upon layers of protection designed over decades, crafted with the understanding that someday, someone would come to destroy them. In the human command center, far below, the rocky surface of Antarctica. Commander Ryland studied the reports. He knew the Vorgans were coming. The signs were clear. Unusual ship movements, encrypted transmissions, the sudden silence of certain enemy sectors. "They are planning a full assault," said General Hale, standing beside him. Ryland nodded. "They will not find the Earth they expect." On the outer edges of the solar system, human scout ships picked up the first signs of the incoming Vorgan armada. Hundreds of massive ships, glowing with deadly energy, moved together like a dark storm. They were slow but unstoppable. A tidal wave of destruction aimed straight at humanity's heart. Human fleets prepared silently. Defense satellites powered up. Hidden weapons under the oceans primed their systems. Automated drones, no larger than insects but deadlier than any missile, were released into the cold space between the planets. Still, humanity waited. The Vorgan fleet pushed closer and closer. Their commanders believed the humans would panic, would scramble to defend their world too late. They remembered a humanity that had once been divided, weak, unprepared. They had not learned. As the Vorgan armada crossed the orbit of Neptune, the first trap was sprung. Fields of invisible mines planted years ago detonated without warning. Dozens of Vorgan ships vanished in silent flashes of light, torn apart before they even knew they were under attack. The Vorgan commanders roared in anger and pushed forward, refusing to be slowed. As they crossed the orbit of Uranus, another wave of attacks hit them. Hidden railguns, buried inside asteroids, fired kinetic slugs at unimaginable speeds. Vorgan battleships, once proud and unstoppable, were ripped open like paper. But still they came. As they reached the orbit of Saturn, humanity unleashed its deadliest weapon yet. The Eclipse cannon, a relic of forgotten science mounted on a hidden moon base. It fired once, a beam of pure energy cutting through space. Where it passed, space itself seemed to shudder. Entire formations of Vorgan ships simply ceased to exist, torn apart at a level no shield or armor could defend against. Yet, despite the losses, the core of the Vorgan fleet pressed on. Inside the command center, Ryland watched calmly. "They are desperate," he said. "They think if they can reach Earth, they can still win." "What if they do break through?" one officer asked, voice tight with fear. Ryland's eyes were hard as steel. "Then they will see that humanity's true strength is not in our weapons, it is in our will." The Vorgans finally reached the orbit of Earth's moon, battered and broken but still dangerous. They launched everything they had: missiles, plasma bombs, planetary disruptors, hoping to rain death upon the blue world spinning below them. But the final layer of Earth's defense was not metal or fire. It was humanity itself. Thousands of human ships, sleek and fast, burst from hidden bases across the moon's surface. Fighter squads darted between enemy ships, sowing confusion. Human cruisers unleashed coordinated barrages, tearing gaps through the Vorgan lines. Battle mechs, dropped from orbital platforms, landed on enemy ships and fought hand-to-hand against the invaders. Earth's people fought with a fury born not just from survival, but from hope. They fought not just for themselves, but for every world that had believed in them, every ally who had trusted them, every voice that had called out for freedom. In the heart of the battle, Commander Ryland gave the final order: "Drive them back, show them who we are." And as the stars blazed with the fury of the greatest battle the galaxy had ever seen, humanity fought not with fear, but with a strength that shook the very heavens. The Vorgans had gambled everything, and they were about to lose it all. The message to the galaxy, the final battle above Earth, was ending. Across the black skies, the once mighty Vorgan fleet drifted in pieces. Shattered warships burned silently, their twisted remains falling into Earth's gravity and burning up like shooting stars. The few surviving Vorgan ships tried to escape, their engines sputtering, but human fleets closed in from every side, giving no mercy, no second chances. Inside the command ship, Commander Ryland stood still, his eyes fixed on the display in front of him. Red lights showed enemy ships destroyed, disabled, or captured. Only a few scattered signals remained, fleeing into deep space like frightened animals. A heavy silence filled the command center. Then slowly a soft wave of cheers began to rise, not loud or wild but full of deep emotion, a release of years of fear, pressure, and hidden strength. Across every human base, every ship, every outpost, men and women smiled through tears. They had done what many thought impossible. They had survived. But Rylan raised his hand and the cheering stopped. He knew this moment was greater than just a human victory. The galaxy had been watching. Every race, every leader, every common citizen from 100 worlds had seen the battle unfold, and now they waited for humanity's answer. Would humanity become conquerors like the Vorgans? Would they seek revenge, destruction, domination? No, humanity had fought for freedom, not for power. It was time to show the galaxy who they truly were. Open all communication channels, Rylan ordered. Broadcast across every known frequency. His officers moved quickly. Within minutes, Rylan's image appeared across the galaxy. Giant screens on distant planets lit up. Holograms shimmered in crowded cities. Old radios crackled in hidden rebel camps. The people of the stars, friend and foe alike, leaned in to listen, and Rylan spoke. "This is Commander Rylan of Earth," he said, his voice calm but strong. "Today, humanity stood against those who would see us broken. Today we defended our home not with hatred but with hope. We fought not to destroy but to survive." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into every corner of the galaxy. "To those who suffer under tyranny," he continued, "know that you are not alone. Humanity stands with you. To those who dream of freedom, we hear you. And to those who believe that might makes right, that cruelty builds empires, know this." His eyes burned with quiet fire. "Humanity does not seek conquest. We seek peace. But if you threaten our home, our people, or the innocent across the stars, you will find us unbreakable." The message was simple, honest, powerful, and it shook the galaxy. On distant worlds, slaves secretly listening to forbidden broadcasts wept with joy. Oppressed races who had lived for centuries under fear now dared to hope. Even old enemies of humanity, once suspicious and cold, felt a grudging respect. In the ruins of the Vorgan High Council chamber, the few surviving leaders listened in silence. Their empire was gone, their pride shattered. They realized too late that humanity had not just won a battle, they had changed the future. The message traveled faster than any fleet. It crossed borders, languages, cultures. It entered the dreams of 1,000 civilizations. It became a rallying cry for those who had long forgotten what it meant to believe in something greater than fear. On rebel planets, fighters gathered under new banners. Old flags, once hidden in the dark, were raised high again. Treaties were signed in secret. Alliances were born in hope. The galaxy, once divided by fear, began to shift, and at the center of it all was humanity. Not as rulers, not as tyrants, but as the protectors of a fragile, burning hope. Inside the command ship, Rylan lowered his head slightly. The transmission ended, but he knew the work had just begun. The galaxy was watching now, not with contempt, but with expectation. Humanity would have to lead carefully, with wisdom and strength. Mistakes would be costly, betrayal would be deadly, but Rylan believed in his people. They had survived the worst. They had endured mockery, betrayal, and attack, and they had not broken. "Send relief ships to the rebel worlds," Rylan said quietly. "Food, medicine, engineers, no weapons unless requested." "Yes, Commander," an officer replied. It was not the easy path. It was not the fast path, but it was the right one, and Rylan knew that in time, even the scars of war could heal. Earth itself began to rebuild. The battle above had left little damage on the surface, but hearts had been shaken. New songs were written, telling the story of humanity's stand. Monuments were planned, not to honor the destruction, but to remember the courage and unity that had saved them all. Young children looking up at the stars no longer saw darkness and fear. They saw possibility. They saw a galaxy that could be changed, shaped by hands willing to build rather than destroy. Humanity's final warning had been sent, but even more important, humanity's promise had been made. And across the stars, new voices began to rise, echoing that promise word by word, world by world. Freedom, hope, and a future that belonged to all. A new beginning. The war was over, but the true work had just begun. Earth turned slowly under a peaceful sky, its blue oceans and green lands untouched by the terrible battle that had raged above. But even though the surface remained calm, something deep inside the hearts of humanity had changed forever. They were no longer the forgotten race at the edge of the galaxy. They were no longer the small, underestimated people looked down upon by ancient empires. They had stood tall against the greatest power the stars had known, and they had won. Commander Ryland stood at the window of the new Global Council building, watching as ships from distant worlds began to arrive. For the first time in history, ambassadors from planets once ruled by fear now came willingly to Earth, not to demand surrender, but to seek friendship. The Global Council itself was a symbol of the new beginning. It was not ruled by a single nation or a group of powerful leaders. It was formed by representatives from every part of Earth, every country, every people, standing together as one voice. They had learned that their strength was not in their differences, but in their unity. Ryland turned as the doors behind him opened. General Hale entered carrying a small datapad filled with new reports. "The last Vorgan warship has surrendered," she said with a smile. "Their commanders have asked for mercy." Ryland nodded. "And we will give it." Hale raised an eyebrow. "After all they have done?" "Yes," Ryland said simply. "Because we are not like them. If we seek revenge, we become the very thing we fought against." Hale smiled wider this time. She had fought beside Ryland through the darkest days, and she trusted his judgment. Humanity's strength was not just in its weapons or its armies, but in its heart. Outside, the city was alive with celebration. Flags of Earth flew alongside the colorful banners of newly freed worlds. Music filled the air, 1,000 different songs blending together into one joyful voice. For the first time in living memory, the stars no longer belonged only to the strong or the cruel. They belonged to everyone. New treaties were signed, not in secret rooms filled with lies, but openly, with words of trust and hope. Human engineers shared their knowledge freely, helping rebuild worlds destroyed by years of Vorgan oppression. Human doctors traveled to distant planets to heal wounds, both of the body and the soul. Even the children of Earth felt the change. In schools, new lessons were taught, not about old grudges or ancient enemies, but about unity, courage, and the right of all beings to live free. Young ones dreamed not of war, but of exploration, of building bridges between worlds instead of walls. But Ryland knew that not everything would be easy. There were still dangers out there, pirates, warlords, remnants of old empires clinging to their lost power. There were still races who looked at humanity with suspicion or fear, and there would always be challenges because the future was not a gift given freely. It was a road that had to be built, one step at a time. Yet Ryland felt no fear, because now he knew the truth. Humanity had faced the worst the galaxy could offer, and they had not broken. They had not given in to hate. They had not been crushed by despair. They had risen higher, and they would rise higher still. "What next, Commander?" Hale asked, her voice soft. Ryland smiled and looked up at the stars, bright and endless above. "We explore," he said. "We learn, we build. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We honor the ones who fought and the ones who dreamed. We remember that the galaxy is not ours to rule. It is ours to share." Hale nodded, her eyes shining. "And we watch," Ryland added, his voice firm. "We watch for those who would try to bring darkness again. And if they come, we will be ready." Together, they left the room, stepping into the sunlight of a new Earth, an Earth stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. Ships rose into the sky, carrying messages of peace, exploration, and friendship to distant stars. New colonies were planned, not as conquests, but as partnerships. Artists painted visions of a future where every race stood together. Scientists dreamed of wonders still hidden in the deep corners of the universe. And somewhere, on a small hill, outside a quiet village, an old man sat beneath a tree, watching the stars. He had seen the dark days and the bright days. He had lost much, but he had never lost hope. He smiled as he saw the first of the new exploration ships break through the atmosphere, its silver wings catching the sunlight. "Go on, children," he whispered. "The stars are waiting." And so humanity began its next great journey. Not with fear, not with anger, but with hope lighting their path and the dreams of 1,000 worlds beating strong in their hearts. Beginning a new future and a promise that would echo across the galaxy for all time.